Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll get started. There might be a few people that join us as we go. Now, just a few housekeeping things before we start. If you're wanting to ask a question, you will find a raise your hand button as part of the webinar software. So if you do want to ask any questions, just use that button and we'll get that message and be able to take those questions at the end of each presentation. So I hope everyone can hear me and see the screen. So, Telework webinar. Now, today my name is Jessie Badger. I'm the Digital Communications Manager at Master Electricians Australia. Today we've also got Jason O'Dwyer, the General Manager for Workplace Relations, and Ananda Kumar, who's from Aliva. They're technology specialists. What we're going to be covering today is what is Telework, what sort of technology considerations you need to take into account to implement Telework successfully into your workplace, and also human resources considerations, how to manage people effectively when you've got them working remotely. And then we'll cover off on some questions. So I'll get started. What is Telework? It might be a bit of a foreign term, but you may find that you're actually already doing it. It covers a range of flexible work practices that enable you and your staff to work from a place other than the office, using technology to stay connected to colleagues and work systems. It can include working from home, working from remote locations, a mobile workforce, job sharing, and there's many other functions. Now, over half of all businesses actually use some form of telework. Now, we've done a survey of the electrotechnology industry and found that 70% of employees in construction and trades businesses work remotely or from home. And the uptake of telework is definitely on the rise. With the construction industry, you'll find that, especially in electrotechnology, having a mobile workforce can be teleworking. If your guys aren't having to come into the office or your work shop every day, you're already teleworking. So what are the benefits of teleworking? Look, it's a relatively simple and cost-effective way to improve productivity in your business and to provide employees with a more flexible and balanced way of working. The benefits experienced by teleworking employees can flow back to your business in a range of ways. And these include becoming an employer of choice for skilled talent, better work-life balance and use of new technologies, building workplace flexibility, time and cost savings, example running a smaller workshop or office, being seen as an innovator by taking advantage of digital technologies, and reducing your impact on the environment. So what I'll do now is hand over to Ananda, and he'll be talking about the technology required for teleworking.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you so much for joining us today as well. So as you can see, my name is Ananda. I work for a company called Aliva. They've been around for about 10 years. We're based out of Milton. We're looking after small, medium enterprises similar to yours, and education and government sectors. Basically, the idea behind teleworking and with respect to the technology side of things, I've just listed out some of the things which you currently obviously are doing, like job logging, invoicing, scheduling, ordering, timesheets, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure how much of this you're currently using from a technology perspective, or if you're mostly using any paper and pen kind of environment. The discussions I've had with a few of the electrician and electrical contractors has been that it's a mixed bag. Some of them have been a bit more active in pursuing the technology side of things, and some of them have tried doing it and they've been hit by barrier or because of the new technologies or things. There are so many different things that are out there, and you're not sure which would work and which would not work. Now, just taking the way we're going to be presenting today is basically looking at a few of the things that you currently do, and maybe even talk about a couple of different solutions which are out there that may or may not help, but at least it'll give you an idea of where to start and take you from there. So, for example, job cards and job scheduling. Some of the companies I've talked to so far, they have basically given me 3 different options which they have looked at. One is Smart Trade. Now, the challenge with Smart Trade is they're a New Zealand-based company. They don't have a local presence here. However, they seem to have a reasonably good software system that basically works for people like yourself who are on the road constantly looking at planning on work, scheduling work, and creating job cards and things like that. The other company, which probably you'll all be aware of, is Simpro, reasonably large Australian-based company. There have been mixed messages coming through from different providers, different users of that. Some people like the product, however, they might not be big enough to include all the invoicing and everything else into that. Some of the people who have actually used it said that they wouldn't go back there because they couldn't get the things done the way they wanted it. There's another company called IAudit, which basically I'll be covering that a little bit later on. However, they seem to be having a reasonably good application which can use with your iPads and the iPhones and things like that. Now going to quoting and invoicing, again, Smart Trade and Digital Pen. It's an interesting concept. People who are using Digital Pen, so I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Digital Pen is basically using a specialized pen with a graph paper, where basically it mimics you writing an invoice by hand. A couple of the companies I've talked to, they've said even though they've actually gone with digital pens, it also depends on the person's handwriting, and they couldn't decipher it. So the idea behind digital pen is you actually write your invoice on a graph sheet, and it automatically sends the information back to your admin staff or to your accounts person to create the invoice and send it out to the customer. Some people have found it very helpful, some people haven't. So it's again something which you need to play with and get an understanding of it. One of the biggest benefits of going with technology for whether it's job logging or whether it's quoting or invoicing is the people who have actually gone in that direction I have saved anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes per job. So for a company or a contractor who's doing, say, let's say 10 jobs a week, that's a lot of time which you're saving just in invoicing. And probably the biggest saving comes in when it comes to quoting part of it as well. So you have to think about what's your hourly rate that you're charging to your customers, and looking at the saving that you can have by using and taking on technology. Let's say if you're saving, let's say 10 hours and your hourly rate's, let's say $75, that's $750 a week in savings that you're getting back in, which you can utilize to go back into the market and do more work if you choose to, or take time off, whichever works for you. As I said before, the IAudit application, that's $5 a month per user. It's an app which works on iPads and iPhones. This may or may not suit a lot of the different people, but the companies who do audit work, the site inspections, before they quote the customer for what they need to do, this might be a really useful technology. I just want you guys to play with it and see whether that works for you. If it doesn't. If it does, awesome. And at that $5 per month per user, I think it's really good value if you can use that. We're going to be talking about payments. There are obviously all the different banks have different methodologies and technologies in there. ANZ and a company called Paymate, they seem to have a reasonably good understanding on using technology to leverage and get your payments in time very quickly. This might probably work for people who do retail or residential. It may not work for companies who actually do corporates or bigger businesses. So ANZ have given the cost, which they've said 2.6% merchant fees. Paymate is about 2.475 plus 55 cents per transaction. With Paymate, they basically you actually purchase the little thing that sits on top of your iPhone, and you just swipe the credit card and away you go. It's quicker, faster. You don't have to chase up invoices, and if there's you don't have to be taking people to court and things like that. Payments done, you move forward to the next job. This is another option, safety management systems. Now, this is, from what I understand, the contractors are expected or required or recommended to have toolbox talks and safety meetings on a bi-monthly basis. Now, if you're having staff working in different places, contractors on different times, how would you do these kind of discussions and meetings and systems? There are a couple of options. One is Google Plus Hangouts, which is a free option, which is a video conference you can use on your phone, you can use on your tablet, or you can use on your laptops. That's an option. That's a free option, as I said. As long as everybody has those free options, free installs, they can go from there. The other one is Skype, which is a market leader. Unfortunately, at the moment, it is currently it's a paid service. However, I believe in 2014 it will become a free functionality, so then you can use that as well. Probably one of the last options which I want to talk about is the customer management and marketing. Now, some of the contractors I've talked to, they are using this in a very profitable way of managing information about the customers and making sure that they meet or they go back to the customers on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis for maintenance work. They basically put that in there as a recurring information, and it comes back up again. If it works out well, it's a recurring income for you without trying to find new customers. It's a process which the companies such as yourself would need to look into, but then that's a great way of managing your customers, maintaining your customers, and then creating more income for the businesses. Now, just as a wrap up, the technology is not going to be for everyone. You need to be open to look at different possibilities. It can be hard. However, people like ourselves and people like master electricians, they can give you guidance. They're creating information to help you, take you to the next level, just to make sure that, end of the day, it's profitability. It's about creating more business, creating more income for yourself and the contractors that you work for. That's about it from me at the moment. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or add it into your chat screen.
And then I might ask a question while I'm here. So just in terms of a lever, if a business, electrical business, was looking to be more successful in terms of being able to have their staff work remotely and check in remotely, what can a lever do to actually help facilitate that?
Probably the first thing that we would do is to have a conversation with the contractor and understand what they're currently working on and how their business operates. And based on that, we'll identify a couple of different options, the cost-effective solution that will work for them, and then help them with implementing it and taking it from there. We are more than happy to even have an initial conversation just to understand what they need and what will work for them. So yeah.
Okay, and is that service available to contractors around the country?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
So it sounds a bit like you'd sort of walk them through and provide a few different options. So you're not tied to specific, partners.
Not
you're just helping them, implement the technology.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I think that's all for our technology section. So what we'll do now is pass over to Jason O'Dwyer, and he's going to talk about managing your staff while teleworking.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Linda. Teleworking, really, it's not something new for companies. So, in terms of organisations, it does present a few challenges. And I was interested to hear what Ananda said about the digital pen In 2001, I was part of a trial in the community health sector where we used a digital pen to try and record patient details around the country when we were caring for people in their own home. It's interesting to see that technology is still being used and actually has progressed a fair bit. But what has changed in relation to mobile workforces, really it's about cost and access and reliability. And also, I suppose, from a human resource point of view, it's about community expectations as well, particularly about what's happened with society. So a lot more businesses are now 6-7 days a week. And it's also a situation where that's being driven certainly by trading hours set by individual states. If you look at 7-day trading, the first state in Australia about 7-day trading was Victoria in 1994, and the last one to move to 7-day trading is actually Western Australia, and they had a referendum last year in 2012. So the country now is completely 7-day trading across the country. So that shows you the change that's happened. We've talked a bit about what the possibilities are in terms of that. But the thing to think about in terms of teleworking, and I suppose with electrical contractors, certainly your mobile workforce being your electricians and your apprentices out in trucks and stuff. But if we also look at other things, and I like to look at other things from other industries where outsourcing or banks are offshoring their services offshore, there's no reason why a small business in Australia couldn't outsource their business or outsource their work to an employee who is sitting at home. So rather than having those overheads of having an office where you might have a payroll person or whatever, depending on the size, it's a lot easier to be working from home for that person. So it actually reduces your overheads in that respect as well. Obviously, telecommuting or teleworking has a lot of advantages in terms of there'll be developments with the NBN, which way Minister Malcolm Turnbull goes. They do have a policy at the moment where they want to double the amount of teleworking in Australia by 2020. So that's looking at raising it up to about 24-25% of the population. Certainly in our industry, a lot of that is already happening, and we're probably well and truly above that percentage at the moment anyway. But why do they want to do it? They want to reduce stress on infrastructure, such as transport, carbon emissions, and also increase the workforce participation as well. Now, why does the federal government want to do that? Well, it usually comes down to increased workforce participation means increased taxes for the government to spend. So it's certainly they can certainly see advantages of it. But what does it mean for you as a manager? Well, for me, looking at employing mobile workforces, selecting the right people to work on their own is one of the biggest barriers that you'll have. Getting the right balance of working independently and being able to be self-sufficient, but also providing the tools for them to be self-sufficient. That's one of the big keys for HR practice in this area. Working independently is difficult to find with people sometimes. So depending on your industry, certainly your tradesmen and things like that, you know that they have to have a certain level of education. You know they have to have a level of workmanship through all of the standards. How do you monitor that, which is what you're currently doing, but how do you then transfer that to other staff you might be employing, whether it's quoting, whether it's your back office staff who might not be in an office. So you have to think about those things. And again, monitoring performance. How do you monitor those performance areas? So it's really thinking about some of those areas at the moment where you might be able to utilise what you are currently doing with some of your workforce across the larger part of your workforce. One of the biggest things that I find with any sort of workforce is the communication to the workers and the access of change management with people. It's a situation where if you do change process, how do you communicate back that through to your staff? So again, one big area is about communicating that. You may have already experienced that when you want to change your forms or your invoicing, or you are changing computer systems. How much of that communication has to be face-to-face versus online or over the phone to actually get it to actually bite into your culture. And when I say culture, I really talk about with people, the more high-tech you become, the more high-touch you have to be. And what I mean by high-touch is that you have to form relationships with people so that they feel part of your team. It's very easy for people to disengage and feel isolated. And again, I use the process of what do we learn from other industries, and I've said there, fly in, fly out. We see large amounts of family disruptions, divorce, things like that in the mining industry because they've lost touch with their families. Again, the same sorts of things can happen with mobile workforces where they're not feeling part of a team. So what I'm relating that to is probably a higher turnover rate for you. You're probably all well experienced in terms of what happens to your business if you do have a high turnover rate. So the more high tech, you've got to be more communicative and more what I call high touch with them to make sure they're feeling part of the team and they're feeling well informed. So again, looking at what large companies experience, you're looking at what a lot of organisations experience that are large is that they have a tyranny of distance. So they have that situation where they might have a branch in Cairns from Brisbane, or they might have a branch in Perth from Brisbane or Sydney. And what I've experienced personally is that the further away some of the branches are, there's a little bit less sort of focus on what the business is trying to achieve, and then sometimes you start to get some of those bad habits forming within the organisation. So it really is making sure, and that could experience with your own organisations in a local area if you don't have that high touch. So it's an interesting area from my point of view. One of the largest ones, however, is workplace health and safety. And what I would like to start off by saying is that I can say that Master Electricians Australia at the moment has actually just lodged an iPhone app with Apple, and it's linking with our Safety Connect system. So those of you who may be members of our Safety Connect, we are very close on the verge of actually releasing our first Master Electricians app, and that will actually enable you to conduct some of those basic sort of risk assessments, etc., on your phone and record them back into your databases so that you've got those records, etc. There'll certainly be some more information about that over the coming month or so, but certainly by January next year. But again, as you know, workplace health and safety is probably your biggest area. Now, obviously you've got to do risk assessments, and most of our electricians are very good at doing risk assessments. Considering the dangers associated with electricity, our injury rates are very, very low, and that's down to the culture in the industry. But we have to maintain that. However, if I go a step further, and if we talk about back office staff particularly, you do have to still have those risk assessments done, the hierarchy of controls, even in home and vehicle offices. So vehicles, you're probably on the top of, because you see the vehicles, at least probably once a week. But if you do have people in the home environment, it is important that you do assessments. So if you are going to, what I say, sort of outsource people to be working from home and give them that flexibility, you as an employer still have that situation where you do have a responsibility and you need to take actions to minimise those risks. Again, reporting and rehabilitation, again, can become harder. So if you do have a work cover claim, is it reported appropriately? Are you able to investigate it appropriately? But also, can you get the person back to work as quickly as possible? One of the cases from 2011 that's actually quite topical in this area is Hargraves versus Telstra. And this was a lady who worked for Telstra, who was living at home, working at home and completing her work for Telstra, and she happened to be in her pyjamas and her bed socks, and then fell down the stairs at home and broke her coccyx, I think. Telstra was found to have been responsible in relation to her health and safety, and her workers' compensation claim was approved. Now that was back in 2011, and there was quite a bit about that case at the time. So it is a situation where if you do go to the situation of actually having people working from home, and we have people working from home here occasionally at Master Electricians, Our own policy here for Master Electricians is that we actually get photos of the work area. We look at the infrastructure, being the desks, the lighting, their access and things like that. But anything that happens at home is to be the equivalent of what happens in the workplace. So they are to be dressed the same way as they are at work, closed-in shoes, appropriate for work, etc., etc. So they're our policies, and that's the risk assessment we go through when people apply. However, we also have a situation where we don't approve every single person as well. So it is a situation that it is up to you as the employer that you might deem it to be an unacceptable risk, and it's certainly within your realms to be able to do that. The last area, I suppose, which is really something most people probably haven't thought about in this area, particularly around probably, except for probably New South Wales and Victoria, is that all of the states have surveillance legislation in place. Now, it tells you what you can and can't do in terms of surveilling people. New South Wales and Victoria, however, have specific workplace surveillance acts in place, and they're quite specific. So it's a situation where you have to inform the employees about them being tracked via GPS, that you know where they're going to be, etc., or that they might be filmed. So for taxi drivers, etc., most people in Australia, I think, would have experienced taxis. When you get in the cab, there's a little sign saying your video image will be taken and conversations may or may not be recorded. Those sorts of things, because they're in a workplace, are also required to be done. Now, there have been some industrial cases that have led to industrial action, particularly across larger companies, where, not in the electrical industry, but certainly in the fire protection area, where an employee's interactions with clients were actually being recorded by an employer to build a case to dismiss them, but they didn't inform the employee that they were being recorded. Their case then fell apart when it got to court because they hadn't advised them. So those sorts of things, whilst you're not actively trying to track it because of those sorts of areas, but if you've got a job sheet and it's being logged against the GPS and you know where the truck is, then that can cause issues. We have to balance that also, but because there's a lot of mobile workforces that have situations where, for safety reasons, they have to know where they are. So long-distance truck drivers, it's imperative that they know from a safety point of view where they are so that the employers know what's happening. And they have certainly got systems in place where trucks stop for longer periods of time, or they have impact responses and things like that that happen if the trucks actually turn over. Then the back to base can monitor that and they actually know what's happening with the truck and they can raise the alarms and things like that as well. But again, it's very much a communication with employees about, yes, that is being monitored, but it's not being monitored to catch you out, it's there for your own safety. Okay, so they're quite important. Now obviously with teleworking, risk assessments, etc. like that, obviously the Safety Connect system that we offer has the tools available, but if you aren't a member of the Safety Connect system, then you have a situation where I've listed some links there in the area from each of the states that actually give you an assessment about teleworking, and you can actually do some risk assessments in respect of that as well for each of you, depending on your own personal circumstances. So, but look, to summarise for me, the main situation is, the main considerations I think that employers need to think about is, how do I keep my employees connected with my business if I do go down this track? How do I communicate them any changes? And how do I make sure that they're safe and that I'm operating safely at the same time? Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jason. Just open it up to any questions on that. Just while we're waiting, I might ask a few there. So there's obviously a few scary things there that an employer might sort of think, oh, I don't really want my employees working remotely. There's all these things I have to consider. Is that the attitude, or can it still be implemented?
Oh, look, it certainly can be implemented, but it just means that you have to manage the risks. You've got to identify what those risks are, and again, learning from other industries about what their experiences have been is probably most important. I think, if it's a mobile workforce in place, I would probably start looking at the taxis and about what they've done, or long-distance truck driving. If we're talking about electricians that might be operating for some of our rural and remote organisations, Western Queensland, Eastern Western Australia, where it might be an hour, hour and a half drive between jobs or things like that, or even to the point where they're living away from home. A lot of our members send their guys away. They might be driving trucks up to Roma, or they might be going, to northwestern New South Wales, Broken Hill, whatever it happens to be. The employers need to know how to make sure that they're safe. So rather than GPS tracking, you might simply say, look, when you get there, give me a call. Or it might be a situation saying every 2 hours, make sure you take a break, rest and survive the drive. And give us a buzz that you're okay and you're progressing on your journey. So you don't have to have GPS and all those sorts of whiz-bang things, but it has to be appropriate for your sort of organisation. As most of our members and most of the electricians know, who are people who are conducting a business, the legislation is quite clear that it says the onus is on you to do everything practicable to make sure that people are safe. So, yeah.
Okay, and I guess one more there is, if you've got staff that are already perhaps working from home or remotely and you perhaps don't have, policies or formal policies set up, what would be the best way to approach that? Where can they get assistance on that?
Well, certainly members from MEA can ring us here at the Workplace Relations Department and gain some information from us. We're quite happy to share our policies with the members. There would be other situations where you might be able to get some working from home policies from each of the state departments of workers' compensation or health and safety. But yeah, there would be some alternatives there, but certainly ringing master electricians and having a chat to us about what their needs are, and we can help them write those policies.
Okay.
It was interesting, Jason, you talked about the GPS tracking and things like that. Some of the companies I've talked to, what they do is they do use GPS tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understand, they also have advice that the contractors or their staff that their iPad or tablet or whatever has a GPS functionality in it. And they actually utilize the GPS to identify who's going to be the closest for the next possible job.
That's right.
As you said, similar to the taxi drivers, similar to the tow truck drivers, for example.
Yep.
It can be a really useful technology to use as long as you follow the rules and regulations as you mentioned. Yeah. So it's an awesome choice. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing I failed to mention, but I suppose one of the things that there are tax advantages as well for some organisations. Most of the tradesmen are operating with commercial vehicles, etc. The Australian Taxation Act actually has something called an itinerant worker. So if your worker isn't required to come to the office every day and they operate remotely, their vehicle can actually become fringe benefits tax free. So there'll be no fringe benefits tax on it because they're an itinerant worker. So if they're getting their work orders from the iPad, etc., and I know we have one member particularly, their particular electricians and plumbers, they only go back to, he's got 2 depots in this particular city. The guys pick which one they want to go to restock for the week. So they've got a rough idea of what sort of workload they've got for the week. They know what they need, so they go in, they fill up, and it cuts down that return travel to base all the time. And again, what you were saying before about the quoting and reducing your quoting time and your invoicing time, they're cutting their travel time down back to going off to getting resupplied their trucks and things like that for all their consumables. So there are lots of advantages that can come out of these sorts of systems.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Ananda. I think that was very useful. So afterwards, there will be, the presentation will be sent out, so you can access that, and there's some links in there. Master Electricians Australia also has some more information on our website, which is masterelectricians.com.au/digital. There's just some telework information on there at the moment, and coming into the new year we'll have some more resources available on how to get your business online. So stay tuned. Thanks everyone for joining us.